I've been a program director now in my 9th year, and hopefully will soon be a recovering program director. And I've been in our education division at UMass, I guess, for 19 years. So I've done a lot of this, not necessarily well, but so we'll talk about maybe some strategies and what are some of the barriers to online teaching and learning. So are there any, I'll say, any medical students in the audience? A couple. Any residents? Everyone else is faculty, program directors, clerkship directors, things like that. Research. Is this a research director? All right. Some of what I'm going to show you may be surprising. I learned a bit putting this together. Before I put together using online resources for teaching and learning, I thought it would be interesting to look at the landscape and what are students now in medical school using for online learning. And so this fairly recent study from the Journal of Medical Internet Research and Medical Education from Australia looked at the online, when students would log into their portals at their med school, they basically looked at all the websites that these students looked at. And I'll just highlight here, the most common site visited was Wikipedia, and number 2 was Google, which I think is problematic. The number 1 source that medical students were utilizing at their med school was Wikipedia. And the using online journals or scholarly databases were used infrequently. Overall, OER, or online education resources, they make good use of learning resources recommended to them, but many ignore most sites. All right, so we're setting the bar kind of low. The medical students like Wikipedia. All right, so maybe residents are a little bit better. So this is article is now 4 years old, looking, this is from Canada, looking at what Canadian EM residents, anyone here from Canada? All right, I don't have any Canadian jokes, sorry. So what do the Canadian EM residents do? And they compared what the residents do online to the program directors, and what they found was useful. So again, OER is online educational resources. The residents are in light gray. The program directors are in black. Stars represent statistically significant. So the residents are doing it for core EM education to learn procedures. We'll come back to that. That's the only that are statistically different. You'll look at the connect with peers. The program directors do it more, but it's statistically the same. So that was just kind of interesting. Although it's a very high level, it's like 80% say they do it. Now, they did not track them like they did the Australian medical students when they actually went into their accounts. So what are the perceived value from the resident's perspective and the program director's perspective? Look what came out. The biggest difference was if it was entertaining or not. So the residents want stuff that is entertainment, also known as edutainment. I learned something new. The residents were more likely to access things if it was referred to them by a peer. So a resident says you should check this out, as opposed to if the faculty did. That was statistically significant. Residents were more likely to access a site if a peer said you should do it than if their program director said you should do it. So how do you compare? So obviously what the EM residents in Canada and what their program directors value is different. The residents value edutainment. They do use online educational resources more than program directors. That's not surprising, right? If you're still a trainee, you should be doing more online. You should be doing more learning, I suppose, than the program director. Residents, what panned out is they don't care about the references. They don't care about the primary source. So they read something, and they do not click on the primary source and read it. The residency directors said original sources are important, but it turns out they don't look at the original source either. But at least they say it's important. So I don't know, maybe the residents are more honest. We don't care and we're not going to look at it. And the program director says we care, but we're not going to look at it. All right. So we've raised the bar a little bit. We're a step above Wikipedia, maybe not too far. So this was interesting. The #1 source of surgical preparation for surgery residents is YouTube. Maybe that's where the future is. I will admit, when we're doing a procedure in the ED, I tell them to pull up a video. If you're doing a peritonsillar abscess, you can describe it, or you can just watch a video. But maybe that's where we're headed, right? It's a lot more of this quasi-experiential learning. All right. So I want to show you some of what is out there, and then go through what may be some strategies to utilize or to increase your online usage. Full disclosure, I am not quite a Luddite, but I'm not the most sophisticated technological person. So bear with me. So at SAEM's website, at SAEM.org, we now have the SAEM Online Academic Resources, or SOAR. And I want to show you what those resources are on here, because a lot of these are what have been shown to be strategies that are useful. So when you click on SOAR, and I'll show you, you get these various links. Online education by topic, FOMED, etc. So if you click on online education by topic, you'll come to this page. And they're generally broken up by areas, right? So there's ethics, neurology, psychiatry, career development. And if you click on, for instance, neurology, psychiatry, amongst other things, you'll get brought to, it's actually running, but you can't hear it. So there are, for the last 2 years, and most of the presentations at this meeting are recorded. So you can get all of the didactics online now on the SAEM SOAR website. So that's if you go to this online education by topic. But there's more. So if you click on the FOMED resources instead, you'll get a list of all of these websites and blogs that are continuously updated. Now, it won't automatically feed this to your reader or your phone or your device, but we've used expertise of the SAEM members to determine what they think is useful, and we've put it all here. If you click one down from FOMED was podcasts. So again, here's a list of all the podcasts that the SAEM members say is useful. At the bottom of this page, or the main page, there's also a link to, if there's something that you think is of interest, give us the details, and the SAEM staff will put it up on the website, on the SOAR website. So there's a lot of the videos, which we know that the residents are using, blogs and podcasts in FOMED. And we're going to talk a little bit more about FOMED. All right, so that's a little bit what's available. So how do you go about accessing what's on the internets and use it for education and learning? So Michelle Lynn and her group published a few years ago 5 strategies. And it's interesting because it's now 4 strategies, because one of their strategies is no longer relevant, which is kind of interesting. So they said for strategy 1, use an RSS, so rich site summary or really simple syndicate. Use something called like Feedly or Dig, and it will automatically pull the data, the sites that you are interested in, and dump it on your reader, however often you want. So you don't have to go to the Skeptic's Guide or something like that to continuously get new content. It will get delivered to your reader so you can stay up to date. The problem with that is new users of this still need to find out what's good, and I've shown you there's a lot out there. And then people who are experienced in using it still have to then go through a bunch more sites. And there's a new site, well, I want to look at this. And now if you don't take some sites off, you'll just continue to grow a bigger and bigger site. So it makes data management difficult. So using a RSS to get updated information is one strategy. Another thing is to use compilations to find quality. So SOAR, so we do that on the SAEM website. Life in the Fast Lane also does this. Rebel EM does this to a degree, and WikiEM as well. And Ross Donaldson, creator of WikiEM, won an award this year for this. So the idea here is, instead of going through your entire list on Feedly, what does someone at Life in the Fast Lane or LDM say, oh, this was just published last week, let's critique it, this is what's interesting. So this is another way of trying to stay up to date on what's new without getting overwhelmed. Another one, so the other thing they said in Michelle Lynn's group said you should use a podcast organizer so that it will automatically download new podcasts. I mean, iTunes does that all the time, right? So that was just 5 years ago when they published that. The other thing is to use social networks. So Sermo, does anyone use Sermo? Anyone on Sermo? So Sermo is a physician social network. Not like Facebook, but in order to disseminate medical information, Sermo. So obviously Twitter is the one that's probably used the most, right? Facebook you can do a little, but not much. So Twitter's, and you probably know now that it's a maximum of 280 characters rather than 140 characters. I was a very early adopter to Twitter, but I don't use it much now. In my experience, maybe you can chime in here, people may say a very pithy comment about an article and provide a bit.ly link to the article. But how many people actually click on that bit.ly link, go to the article, and then critically read the article? I think the answer is no one does. And so one of the concerns is that these pithy 180-character tweets then become the truth of that article without any debate. Now, there's some back and forth debate, but it's really hard to be very vigorous in doing that in 280 characters. So that's one of my concerns. I see it all the time. People bit.ly link articles, and people aren't reading them. And then how do you manage the overwhelming amount of noise? Because there are so many people in the Twitterverse now, it's overwhelming. And how do we not spend so much time with our face in our phone? How do we get the value in this without getting overwhelmed? And I don't pretend to have an answer. My answer recently is I just stopped doing it because it's overwhelming. The other one is to do a foam search. Has anyone heard of foam search? So it used to be called Google Foam, right? Foam Google? I think it was called Google Foam initially. It's now called Foam Search. It's run by Google. This is what the site looks like. You simply, I typed the word ketamine because there's been a lot of ketamine recently, right? So I wanted to see, all right, if I type in ketamine in Foam Search, what will come up? And the neat thing about Foam Search, actually it started with EM and critical care. I don't know who amongst us started this, but someone in EM did. So initially it was just EM and critical care references that were shown, but now you can get ultrasound, med ed, journals, etc. So when I typed ketamine in, and I think it says 39% of the hits were in EM critical care, which is probably not too surprising. And then it will take you to journal articles, blogs, podcasts, etc., relative to ketamine, which is kind of neat. So Foam Search. Yeah, I think if you type foamsearch.com or Google Foam, you get the same place. Had anyone heard of this before? A couple of you. So there's challenges to all of this, right? I showed you a little bit of what's out there. Interestingly, some of these things disappear, right? So there used to be Google+, which was a social network, right? It folded. There was another foam, iClickEM was a EM foam ed site. It folded. So these things turn over, which is interesting, right? Because at some point, I showed you all the podcasts, et cetera, right? The universe is overfilled, right? Is there room for another one? Does there need to be another EM podcast on something? The answer is, personally, I think it's probably not. So will some of these things start falling away? So just when you get used to something, it disappears. And that's what I talk about the saturation point. What does Foam Ed 2.0 or 3.0 look like? I don't know. What I do clinically in practice, and I've tried to find studies about this. Maybe they exist. I just couldn't find them. By using a WOW in a room and addressing a clinical question with a resident right there using FOAMED or Google Scholar Search or something, is that any better than going back, printing out an article. Remember when the older people here, when you trained, the residents walked around with their pockets full of folded up articles, right? It's kind of like a badge of honor. Well, my residents don't even wear white coats anymore, so there's no place to put articles. But is it better? I still print off articles. I don't know, that's the way I am. Instead of doing it right there at the bedside, I'll do a quick lit search thing with them there and print out things that are irrelevant. That's how I do it. And they probably, the residents listen to me? No, they don't. So in this 15 minutes, I was tasked with showing you a little bit about what's available online to enhance your education, your teaching and learning for your residents and medical students. I won't pretend to have the answers. I hope I showed you some of what's available and highlighted some of the challenges that we all have as educators now, responsible for teaching the physicians that will take care of us when we get older. And that's a scary thought. I'm happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
So, watching this evolution over the last couple of decades and what have you, with the movement to secondary reviews and that these are the articles like you just showed us that people want sound bites and little readable digests of a full article because they're never going to read a full article. What are your concerns about the second order peer reviews having bias? Because the person who wrote that second order peer review may or may not have their own elements of bias about how they interpret that study. And if the primary reader then doesn't have the critical appraisal skills or the willingness to go to the primary article and read it for themselves, then there's risks there.
That's a great point. So the question was, with secondary kind of crowdsourced reviews, how do you avoid some of the biases, et cetera, when the person who's receiving this information doesn't read the article themselves? Totally valid question. I guess there's always some bias, right? Whether it's traditional peer-reviewed versus group-source reviewed. As someone who's reviewed manuscripts for a long time, if I'm reviewing a manuscript, I spend a lot of time reviewing a manuscript and putting together a review. Like if you're just reviewing something on ketamine that you heard about, and then you know, in maybe 280 characters, that's your review. So I worry that people aren't putting the effort into it. Now that's a little bit different than the bias you mentioned, but I do worry about it. Now I guess you could say, well, instead of having 3 people review a manuscript and put a bunch of time in it, you have 100 people doing it and doing a little bit of time. Is that better? I don't know. Maybe. I tell you, one of the other concerns I have is, although right now we may have reached a saturation point, and some sources will probably go away, or people will realize they're getting no traffic and stop. I do worry that there are some major people in this realm whose voice may be a bit overemphasized. I remember, I don't know, 20 years ago when cocaine-associated chest pain was real big, right? And Judd Hollander was the cocaine-associated chest pain. And he would write he wrote most of the textbook articles, textbook chapters about cocaine-associated chest pain. And maybe that's not right? Maybe you don't want that one person's voice being the one that is heard by most people. And so I do worry a little bit personally about some online resources where this one person, these 3 people become the voice for everything. I mean, I don't want to say names, but they're the ones where you're working a shift and you're like, really, you're going to say the name again? So, my advice. Yes?
I mean, I think that's where being able to comment on what they put online is important. So if those 100 people go to that guru's thing that he puts up there that says something ridiculous, and those 100 people say, no, that's not correct, then I think that's the way kind of that system can work, potentially. Now, it takes the village of people to actually do that. I will dispel your myth. I do click on links on Twitter and read the articles. Not every time, but some of the time. And sometimes I'll read the abstract and go, that isn't really what I thought it was. I'm not going to. So it does happen, but it's probably the minority of the time. So I think that's kind of that's part of the phone 2.0, that sort of an interactive nature of it that is probably going to be coming. It's probably already here for some of the sites.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Anyone else have questions or comments? Yes, please. Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of including that. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Scary, right? To think that like, do you know who that is? Like, I would rather. I hope my residents know next year. You know, first year out of practice, first year's out of practice. If you send me a text, I'm away. Probably I'm away. Like, I will try and respond. And I've had a couple like text me sometimes, and I'm like, were you just talking about what you were doing yesterday, or is this like a real time thing? You know, that you're wondering what you should do. And I think that, but it's really kind of illustrating for them the risks and the fear. And I think that that's something that's a very hard thing for, as like a generational shift. Well, I'm used to like, if I go to this article, I know the process through which this article is created and peer reviewed and all what that means.
Full rosen off the shelf.
Yeah, if I pull rosen off the shelf, I know what that means. And yes, it's faster to figure out question input, but what is the risk involved?
Yeah, those are great comments. Yeah, it's here to stay for sure, right? I mean, I like the idea. I'm sure has anyone done the journal club like that, like pulling comments off of crowdsourced reviews?
Well, what we did recently was
Could you tell everyone where you're from?
Bush Humber with Indiana University. So we did a journal club actually just last month where it was blanking on the name of the paper, but there's a paper in I think it was New England Journal on fluids and pediatric TKA, like rapid fluids or slow fluids. I can't remember all the details. I don't see a lot of kids anymore in my emergency department. So, but we had all the residents read the article, and then we had each of our classes was given a separate blog post about the article to review, and then we got together with groups and kind of talked about sort of the different biases that each of the groups came in with it. One of them was from a British group that talked a lot about all their standards that they had to uphold, and how this article was in conflict with that. Kind of sparked a little bit of discussion there. We talked about the quality of each of those blog posts as well. And one of the things, and Teresa Chan was actually a busy professor for this, so that was really, really nice. One thing she said is that ability to provide comments is like one of those quality indicators for a blog or a focus group for them to open themselves up to those comments from the crowd. And if they're not doing that, then they're not providing references, they're not providing an ability to actually comment on their post, then that would be markers that maybe this isn't a great resource to go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Butch. Yeah, good points.
I think the next step beyond just having the comment section too is then going back and editing the original blog post. I mean, you see this a lot in just national media these days. They'll have the correction for something that was an error. You know, we have blog posts now, we have all the comments. Now we need to go back and have the original author or the editors of the site address the comments as needed in the blog post. So it's not that people are accessing something from now 2013, you know, 3 years from now, and mistaking it for the most up-to-date research just because it's under the heading of governmental laws.
Yeah, it's kind of like an extraordinarily accelerated letter to the editor in the author's reply that you see in journals. Yeah, right. It's a good point. Thank you.